Okay, good morning. We're in the middle of some sugyas of Zeroyim about deciding what's the ikar. Is it the we had a shaila? Do you go after the root or do you go after the taisefes? Right. So we saw yesterday we went after the root, but that was only l'chumra. We want that was the chumra by Klei Kerem, by Orla. But what was the din by what? By going after the taisefes to be makel the Indian the oimer to say that what it would not need to wait for another Omer. So that we said was a Shiloh. We went Teku with that Shiloh. Now we have another Shiloh that's built off that Shiloh. We're beginning on Samech Tes Be Base Mamish, the bottom line. Boy Rava, let's change the gear. So Boy Rava, Le'inyan Maisa Mai. Regarding Le'inyan Maisa, what's the din regarding the Akar? Do you go after the root or not? Hey Chidami, what exactly is the case under discussion? What exactly is this case discussing? The Amdinu, you went ahead and you took off in the shibalim when they were before they were processed out of the husks to have miruach. You had them in the husks, and therefore it's possible to take off maisa beforehand. That's a little nakuda. Why you could take a maisa be'amida. Maisa usually is an exact amount. A tenth here you're taking it out ba'oimit because you don't know exactly how much it is. Vasrinu, vishatlinu, and you went ahead and replanted it. So now I replanted something that's not Maisa because I took Maisa off already. And now what? It goes ahead and it grows. Intim soloima loyazlin and basa ika v'taisefes. Right? If you're going to tell me you don't go after basa ika v'taisefes, boy isure. All right. If you're going to tell me if you're going to imtim saloina that you don't the imtim saloina the pier shaila that but basa you go after the ikar v'taisefes boy yisure. If that's the case, guys, if you're going to go after the ikar, right, then you're going to have to go ahead and take meiser off the taisefes. That would be a chumrah. Ikar mai. What about now? In other words, guys, the ikar over here has been upgeshet. We say in Yiddish. The ikar up here so I planted something that's not mechuyev and trumas semaisa because I took it off already. Now it grows. So if your machmir would mean I'm not going after the ikar because the ikar is not good. Here's the question: if the tosefes is, would that make the ikar chayiv maisa? If you don't go after the ikar, you don't go after the root, and therefore the tosefes will be chayiv meiser. Well, now what's the din in the ikar? Does it revert back? And now that would be what? Chayiv meiser. So that's the Gemara. Let's see the lashon again. Intim selaima lo yaslin and basa ikar, and therefore v'toisefes ba'isure. If you don't go after the ikar, which had been tithed, which had been upgeshet, and therefore the toisefes requires a maisra, ikar mai. What about the ikar? Does the ikar revert now and you have to take off maisa? Why is it different than any case of what? Of seeds, of wheat and barley. Guys, when you go ahead, you took care, you miced everything. Now you want to replant it. You're planting something that was upgeshet, right? You're planting something that had been taken off already. So the question is, when you put it back in and it grows, you chayiv. So why is this any different? I took Maisa off the shibalim. I replanted it. It grew. Why should it not have to take Maisa off on the shibalim that's inside the ground? It should be no different than any what? Any regular case of agriculture where you took off Trumas and Maisa, you used it, now you replanted it, and nonetheless you have to go ahead what and you're required to take Trumas and Maisa again. So who then over here? Says the Gemara, Amalei. So who's talking to who? Abaya. So Abaya. So Rabbi said to Abaya, Amalei, Dobashe Zaroi Kala Loimi Boili. Anytime where the seed goes ahead and is destroyed in the ground, I have no shaila. That's like a panim chadashas balakan. Fellas, I don't know too much about farming, but this is the assumption what I do know. If you take a seed and you put it in the ground, that seed now germinates. It's not the original seed. It's the original seed is considered vayechulu. It's considered finished, and now it's a brand new seed. So you want to know why when you plant a seed, it's chayiv and meiser. It's because the one that had been upgeshet, the one that had meiser been taken off, is now no longer there. So that's not my shaila. Elki kami boili, my shailu is dava shein zarakila. My. So over here, when you took the shibolim, that was the husk, and you put the whole thing in the ground, it seems that when it grows, it's not going ahead and destroying the ikka. You still have the ikka over there. So therefore, I have a shaila. If you don't go after the ikka lechumra, and the Tosefes is chayv ma'isa by davas she'ein zaroi kila, that it's still going to be there since it had been tithed already. Do you say you don't have to take off trumas ma'isa, or do we say no, that the Tosefes will go ahead and create a din in the root that you'd have to take off trumas ma'isa? That's the shaila. Lamdish shaila. So it says in where tif shalemiha. Let's be patient from here. The Amar Yitzchak, Amar Rav Yochanan, litra batzel, a liter of b'tzelim. B'tzelim are onions. Onions are bulbs. Bulbs do not go ahead. Ein zare kilo, guys. This is the case of right. They regerminate, right? Shetiknu, you took off meiser. V'zaro, and you planted them. Mis'asel lefi kuloi. When you go ahead and figure out how much meiser, you have to take into the account the percentage of what was planted. What do you see? That once it's in the ground, even though it's davar she'ein zare kilo, you chayiv in meiser. So let's be paishat shayla. If the Tosefes will go ahead and create in the shibolim that's in the ground the chiyuv to take off ma'isa, despite the fact you took ma'isa off already. So again, an onion which its zaroi is not kila, it still remains intact. You have to take off ma'isa. Who are in the shibolis, which is it's the zaroi is not destroyed. You would have to take off ma'isa. That's the Gemara's once we push it. Says the Gemara, you have no raya. Hasam hainus v'yasai, hachalav hainus v'yasai. When you take an onion and plant it, that's the normal. When you take a shibolim, a husk of grain, and plant it, that's not normal. So even if ein zara kilo by onions and you have to take a maisa, that's because darkei bekach, guys. That's the derek siriyosai. Mashenkin over here by the replanting of a shibolim of grain, that's not derek. And so therefore, you still remains a shaila. It remains in a baya the lo yeshita. Okay, good. Now. Amalei Reb Chanina bar Minyume LaAbaya. Reb Chanina is going to ask a cryptic shaila to Abaya, and Abaya is going to figure out what he really meant. Otzitz she'ein enokov mahu. Now, an otzitz that does not have a hole in it, so it's not considered part of the ground of Eretz Yisrael. It's not connected to the ground, so it's otzitz she'ein enokov. There's no hole in it, so it's an entity unto itself. So the havamina is. Can you take off from that on what? Can you take off from that on an Eina Nakov or Nakov? Says the Gemara, Mahu. Eloi Nakov, Haloi Nakov. In other words, if you're going to take it off on another Atzitz Loi Nakov, you're taking off from Patur al Patur. So what's your Shaila? In other words, Rashi, V'kaparach, Hashas, Eloi Nakov, Haloi Nakov, V'shapitarim, Diminat Patur al Patahu. So if you're taking one on Atzis She'ein Nakov, on an Atzis She'ein Nakov, it's fine. So why was your Shaila in the first place? Says Gemara, I'll tell you what the Shaila was. Dilma Chazav V'nakhu Ka'amrit. Right? Perhaps you went ahead and you made a hole. Okay, what's the case? Let's see Rashi, and then we'll speak it out. Rashi, Dilma. Binichusa Chazar V'nakfu. You went ahead and you made a hole in it again. You made a kamrit. So it grew when there was no hole, and now you made a hole. So guys, for all intents and purposes, making a hole is like replanting it in the ground. For all intents and purposes, when you make a hole, it's like you're planting it, right? You're planting it. The hacha kami boile, atzat shein and nakov, v'god lahat tfua b'miktsas. So you had an atzat that was not nakov, and it wasn't chayiv in trumas and ma'isa midaraisa, and it grew a little bit. V'achakach nakfu, and now you went ahead and made a hole in it. Mahul asure mine ubei. Can you take off maisa one from the other? Can I take off the maisa for the part that was ein nakov on the part that was nakov? And if you don't say you go after the ikar, meaning the part that grew when it was ein nakov, and therefore the sefes that grew afterwards, you'd have to take off maisa. Guys, so look, you have a pot. It grew a little bit, there was no hole. Now you made a hole and it grew. If you don't go after the ikar, you're going to have to take maisa off the part that grew, correct? If you go after the ikar, it's pater, because of course it was ein nakov. But now this grew nakov. Can you take off? Now the shaila is do you have to take off? Can you take off one to the other? Or is it from Minapatur Lachiv? Says the Gemara, let's see Rashi. V'tesefer shegod la'achan kiva boy yisurei. Hilkach. Le'matzi yisurei min ha'ikar ala tesefes. You can't take off from the bottom to the top, right? The one that was, the top now was what? Was Ein Nakov. The bottom is Nakov. The Havilei min ha'patur alachiv. Because when the top part, guys, is Pata, because it was Ein Nakov. The bottom part is Chayiv because it's Nakov. Dilma ikonami mechayiv, the zil basa tesefes, lechumra. Maybe no, maybe the ikar will also be chayiv, because you go after the tesefes, lechumra. Lechayiv is the ikar, umatzi lafrushamine, ubei. You guys, this was similar to the shaila of Rava Miboy. The hachi mashma, atza shein nakav. Okay, so says, let's go outside. Guys, you want to know the shaila? Here's the shaila. It's mamash alumdish shaila. You have an atzav that has no hole in it. So it's part of the raisa from Trumas and Maisa. Right? And it grows a little bit. You make a hole in it now, and it grows more. So the top part is pata, and the bottom part is chayiv. If you go after the ikka, then the bottom part is also pata. If you don't go after the ikka, right, here's the shaila. Could you go ahead and take off from this on this? Or you take off from the betur alachiyev? Or not. So that's the Gemara shaila. Let's see it inside. It really doesn't state it inside that clearly. It's really, without Rashi, we're lost. Says the Gemara. Amalei Rav Chanina bar Mumli Abaya. Atza sheina nakav mahu. So Abaya said, "Eloi nakav hal nay nakav." It's pater mel pater. Says the Gemara, "Dilma chazav in nakvu kamrit." It's speaking where you made a hole in it again, and now you have two growths. The growth ein nakav, and that's pater, and the growth that's nakav is chayev. Hacha chad zriya hi ichpuri hu kamechabre, right? V'oila. And Hasam Shtei Zriyas Ninu, and that is what those are two Zriyas. So over here, there's more of a svar to save that the mechuber that you should be able to go ahead and take off one from the other. Masha'enke in the other place was two, right? Over here, it's connected. Over here, it's considered one Zriya. When you go ahead and make a hole in it, it doesn't take off the fact that it's growing from the original one. So therefore, they would all be chayiv and meiser. Masha'enkein, the other case with the shiboilis was two separate guys. Because what do you want to tzushtel? You want to tzushtel the following case. I have the shibolim. That is that I took off meiser. I put it in the ground and now it grows. So what do you want to know? You want to know, is there a din in the shibolim that you have to take off meiser again? What about this case? The case of otzitz nakov, that you made a hole in it, it grows, and you're going to have to take off meiser on the ein nakov part. So you see that you go after the taisefes. So why don't we say the same thing in this case? Just by the case of ein nakov, you're going to go after the taisefes, who are then over here. On that, the Gemara answers, there's a big chiddush. Over here, it's one zriya. You planted when it was ein nakov, you made a hole in it, and the continuity is because it's a hole in it, but it's not considered a new pflanzing. It's not considered a new planting. Masha'enkein, when you took meiser off outside and then you replanted it, that's a second planting. So therefore, you can't even replace it from here. Here, if you have to take off trumas and meiser, it's because it's one planting. Masha'enkein over there, where it's two, you'd still remain a shaila. Guys, we're good? They're mamish like Zeroyim. All of a sudden, Menachos meets Zeroyim. Boy Rabavo, she boilis shemarcha bikri. You went ahead, you did me ruach. That means it's chayiv and meiser. That's the gemar malacha, tim chayiv me and meiser. She boilis shemarcha bikri, v'shasla. So now it's chayiv and meiser, and you plant it. You're planting, so you're planting meiser. You're planting tevel. It's called tevel. V'kora Allah shein b'mechubar. And now you say that I planted shumas should be taken off over there. You know. We know that we can go ahead and physically do not have to go ahead and separate it. We can separate it with dibur. So I have a pile of grain. It's smoothed over. That creates the chiyuv of trumas and meiser. I take part of it. I put it in the ground. Then I say that part that's in the ground is the truma. Okay, that's now mahu. Even the marcha Tavlala. So when he did miruach, it's tevel, meaning yechayiv to tithe. Kikar l'shem kachala, and therefore when he called the shame on it, it's kaidesh, meaning it's truma. And now this pile grain is tithe, and you could eat it. Aidilma keeping the shasla, once he went ahead and planted it, pakala tivlamine, it lost the shame tevel, and therefore it won't help to call it what? Truma. So the shiler is this pile considered untevel or not? Well, it's contingent upon the ability. Do you view the part that he put in the ground? Do you view it as tevel or not? If you view it as tevel, then what? Then you separated trumas and maisa. If you view it as non-tevel, because I replanted it, then you did nothing, and then the Kri would still have mechayev to take off trumas and maisa. That's the shaila. Amri le Rabbanu Labaya, im kain, right? If it's chal, shame truma on that's in the ground, matzinu truma b'mechubel karka. If you're going to tell me what you replanted in the ground and you call it truma, has the same truma, nimsa, you'll find something, you'll have truma b'karka. You'll have truma b'karka. V'tanan, now if you look at the side, the new guys have a number. The old fellas, meaning Nassan and me, Benji's Gemara is in shul, right? If you look at the side, it says L'koitze daiti, says this is where Yeshua pick, fellas. Yeshaya picked the Masaras Hashas. L'koitze daiti lo yadati l'tzayin mikomo. I don't know to find its place. B'mishnah or b'braisa she'mufurish davazeh. Ich hab nicht gefunden. He says, you say Tanan? No. Tanya? No. I love this like the people who know everything. He said, I didn't find it. It's garnish. I didn't know. So in other words, it says Tanan, guys, but there's no Tanan. It's not even a Tanya. It's not a Tosefta. It's not a Brisa. Not a Mechilta. It's garnished. I don't find Truma that's Mechubal Karka. Amalei. So Abaya said, Ki Tanya hahi le'inyan achiyuve misa v'choimish. When do we say that you don't find the Truma le'inyan connected to the ground? That's only regarding a zor eating truma. If a zor, a non-Kohen eats truma, he's chayiv misa b'dei shemayim, and he has to pay a fifth, which is really a quarter, right? That's what we said. That's what it means. That's what it means. You don't find mechubal karka, but enochinami to plant tevel and call it truma, that you could find. Now, where do you see the italish vacho, talish who? That by the regarding truma that's growing. And you called it, while it was growing, you called it. So if you disattach it and eat it, you disattached it. And if you go ahead and crouch down and eat directly from the plant into your mouth, that will say ein truma mechuber, meaning if a person does that, he will not have to pay. He will not be chayiv misa b'dei shemayim. He won't be chayiv what to pay the chaimish. So really, you do find the case of mechubal karka. So a shaila is a viable shaila. The shaila with if you go ahead, smooth over a kri, tevel gomer, place it in the ground, kari shame, it's shayich that's truma. I ain din truma karka. That's regarding this din of a zor eating if he eats it when it's the truma when it's attached to the ground. That's not derech achila that is b'chayiv misa and pei chaimish. Good, got it. That's the din. Now we're attacking that next din. Umayshna, that din that you told me that you're not chayiv misa if you bow down and eat it. Midekosiv a pinkasa de ilfa, the pinkest of ilfa. It's very interesting. Here the Shinantam brings in a multitude of places where we find this idea of the pinkest. I'll read for you a few of these places. What he says. He says, Ayin. Tainis Chafalef Amid Aleph Maisa Ilf Rabbi Yochanan. Guys, a famous Maisa there where Ilf and Rabbi Yochanan decided to go to work, and Rabbi Yochanan he went and he heard something saying that Nebuch, that look what's going to happen to Rabbi Yochanan, and he went back to the base medrash and he became Rabbi Yochanan. Ilfa went to work, and then Ilfa came back and he stood on that top of a ship and said, and asked him from Lova. It's a nice Gemara to look up. The Gemara is in Tainis Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph. Vulay Kosev Ilfa. Dinim shezacha mit kufis limudai b'yeshiva al pinkis. He left yeshiva. He went to work, You know what the pincus of Ilfa is? That's what he wrote down that he shouldn't forget his learning. He wrote down on this pincus. So that's where you get the pincus of Ilfa. Since he left the yeshiva, he wrote down that's the source for pincus de Ilfa. Ukamosha Masinu, Kamosha Kosadnu Pinkasayim. Ksiva Pinkasa de Levi, Ksiva Pinkasa de Ziri, Ksiva Pinkas de Yeshua ben Levi, Shabbos Kuf Nun Vav. So he brings other places where you find that idea. So the idea of the pinkus was to go ahead and to remind one of one's learning, right? Heshi, it's not what you're thinking. It's terrible that I can read his mind, and trust me, it's not good. Okay, so pinkus still. So Beit say now. Why did I write it on the pinkus of Ilfa? Beit say nevelas oiftar. Guys, now what do we know about a nevela? Okay, a little yediyah. Nevela of an oiftame is not matama. Nevela of an animal is matama. It's an avatuma. If you find a dead eagle and you touch it, it's not an avatuma. If you find a dead chicken and you put it in your mouth, it's matama beis abliya. Okay, so now you have the egg of the chicken, right? They have a chicken. Half the egg is in and half the egg is out. So now, nevela sa'oif hatahar miktsasam b'chutz miktsasam b'fnim. B'fnim mitamayim begadim beis abliya. If you ate it inside, right, it's going to be mitamayim begadim. B'chutz a mitamayim begadim abeis abliya. Now, how in the world is it b'fnim? It must be that you're eating it from the inside. Talish avidi. Okay, so what do you see? What do you see, fellas? That you see where it's mechubar. It is derech achila. Now, as we're asking a side question. You told me to bow down and eat from a piece of grain directly from the source is not derech achila, and you be pata. Of course, it's mechubar. But 1 second, this egg is also mechubar, correct? Correct, guys. The egg is also mechubar. So what's the difference? And you know what the answer is? The chicken's disattached. The egg is attached to the chicken, but the chicken's not attached to the ground. That's the difference. Says again, another chicken for the egg joke, right? What you do with this? Says the Gemara. So, and for the Gemara, Talish avidi inshi de'achli, right? Over there by the chicken, it's what it is, Talish, and Talish is the normal way for a person to eat. Masha'en came what by the ground, it's mechubat to the ground, that's not normal. Amar Rav Tivumi bar Kisna Mashmuel. Hazarei kalayim ba'atzis she'ein nakov. You plant kalayim in an atzis she'ein nakov. You plant kalayim in an atzis that's what it's not connected to the ground. It's not connected to the ground, but for all intents and purposes, you have it together in one kli. You have it together in one kli. So you have it atzis she'ein nakov. It's not being yoni from the ground, but you went ahead and you asr. It's asr. It's mashma, you don't get malchus, it's aser. I'm going to buy a bishlemi, eshmin, and like a malchus mardis, midrabban, and shapir. Bishlemi, you're going to tell me that you get malchus the rabbanon, that's a chiddush. Ella, aser, to tell me it's aser, my kamashmalon, there's no chiddush over there, right? Midim rabbanon have zuriya, right? Tanina. So if midrabbanon, it's considered what? So my kamashmalon, and for the Gemara, the midim rabbanon have zuriya. Even atzah shein and nachav, right, Tanina, okay, midrabanan havisuriya. To tell me midrabanan suriya says, but it's also known. Tanina, we learned that already. Tarim misheina nakov ala nakov truma b'yachsav yitrum. We're calling it truma. So in other words, the chiddush is that it's midrabanan. Says, I know it's the rabbanan. We call it truma. So what's your chiddush to tell me you're chayiv for kalayim in an eina nakov? I see it's considered a zuriya by the fact that you take truma off one or the other. That it's called truma. You have to redo it again, but it's called truma. Since it's called truma, then therefore, what obviously it's considered as riya, and therefore you be chayiv. It's also to do. Okay, next mishnah. And yani diyayma, mamish. It's amazing. Mamish and yani diyayma. Okay, the 5 grains: chita, sa'ira, kusemesh, shiboilish, shuel, shifoin. I will not test you on this. I will teach it to you. We all know chita is wheat. We all know sa'irim is barley. Kusmin, guys, is spelt. The way you remember it's spelt is the samach. Here's my mnemonic. The samach is spelt like an S, spelt. And then you know that you have a choice of oats and rye. Shibboleth shul is oats and shifan is rye. So again, that should once you get the spelt out of the way, it's 50-50, and Shibboleth shul, people remember it's oats. Okay? So those are the five grains. Hari elu chayavim b'chala. All these five grains are chayiv in chala. Umitstar from zeh im zeh. In fact, they combine with each other in certain ratios. We're going to see, but they combine with each other in certain ratios. Certain if it's mixed together. Asurim b'chadash. They're all it should be the oimer. Asurim b'chadash mifnei oimer, right? Which make sense. They're all chadash that need the heter of the oimer. Ula mixam lefnei ha'omer. In addition, we saw you can't cut them before the omer. Remember, we had the machloikas between Rabbi Huda and Reb Meir, whether they were happy in the Shuka Yerushalayim, where they found that there was adorned with all kinds of things. And we said they weren't cut. How'd they get them? The shinoi, why isn't Rabbi Huda worried? Because he cut it kituf. You cut it with your hands, remember? Because it was us to cut. You had to go ahead and use your hands. If it takes root before the omer matters it. So if it doesn't take root, then you have to wait for the next omer. So we saw all of this. There's nothing here that we have not seen. Okay. Now, from the Mishnah, it's mashma by linyan chala that all five combine. It seems that that's not exactly so, as we're going to see from Rashi and Tosfos. Tana, kusmin min chitin. Kusmin spelt is a type of wheat. Shibala shul v'shifoin min so'irin. However, oats and rye are types of so'irin. So in subcategorizing it, there's two categories. There's chita and so'ora. Spelt, kusmin is a subcategory of wheat. Shifa and shibala shul are subcategories of what? Of barley. Why do you have to know this? For Rashi, kusmin min chitin, le'inyan chala, it's terech. You need a le'inyan chala, kidamin mesech the chala. Hachitin ein mitztarfim in hakol. Chitin is not mitztarf for chala, chutz min hakusamim, except spelt. So if you have oats and wheat together, it's not combining. Rye and wheat together, it's not combining. Barley and wheat together certainly is not combining. The only thing that would combine in challah would be spelt and wheat. Hasoirim mitztarfin im hakol, chutz min hachitin. Soirim would be even with spelt would be except wheat. Why did we learn this over here? Mishum masnisan ari bechala, because our Mishnah is talking about chala. Uketoni mitztarfim zeh im zeh. And our Mishnah said it's mitztarif one altogether. V'yasa taisefta lepirushay. Comes along this taisefta to explain it. So guys, look back at the Mishnah. Chita sa'irin kusmin shiba l'shuel shifain hariel chayav mechalu mitztarfim zeh im zeh. If you wouldn't have this Rashi, this taisefta, you would say everything combines. Wheat, barley, spelt, everything combines. The taisefta is saying it's not true. It's not true. Wheat will combine with spelt and nothing else. Spelt will combine with barley and shifain and shuel shul will combine with barley. But the only thing that will combine with wheat is spelt. So again, this is the explanation. Mitzvah from zeh does not mean across the board in their subcategories, and spelt across the board. Okay, soirin across the board, except chita. Now the Gemara gives what they know in those days. Kusmin amid beis. We're not familiar with these the names. Kusmin is called gulba. Shifoin is dishra. Shibolish shul is shibolish tala. Again, that was the translation from Hebrew, from Lashon Kodesh to Aramaic. That's what it was. What it's called. And I gave you the English term. So it seems to be there's no machloikis usually. They usually say that's pretty much Pita Soira, that's pretty much what it is. Spelled, yeah. Yes, Baruch?
I don't know if you looked it up. Is this halacha l'maisa that wheat doesn't combine with rye in order to make it?
I don't know. I didn't look up the halacha. I didn't look up the halacha. So, but linyan chala, you have to look it up. But again, according to this, they're not mitzaref. Only wheat with spelt. You know what? It's interesting. My daughter has kids who are gluten free. And spelt seems to be a little, even though it's in the chita family, which is gluten, it seems to be much less. It seems to be much less.
When I make rye, I mix it with wheat and rye, and I always make a bracha if I have to. If I don't know,
Like people have
Yes, my friend does spelt the whole year. Spelt matzahs. That's what he makes every motzi.
Yeah. Spelt, they're very expensive. They oat matzahs, spelt matzahs.
but people who need gluten free use spelt.
Yeah. Of course, it's the closest thing to wheat, which would make sense. I've tasted oat matzah, and it's mamsha. It's not, you don't have to make a bracha on it. Like kind of, it's not. It really is. Really, I mean, really, it'll break your teeth, and ooh, ooh, ooh. It was almost as bad as when my son-in-law brought home date beer for Pesach. You cannot believe what date beer tastes like. You wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy.
or the bucks are on Tu B'Shvat.
Only from a paper bag that's from last year. Okay. Anyway, weiter. Hani in, only these are mitzdarif, right? These are mitzdarif and chayim challah. Oires v'doichin loy. Oires we touches rice. Doichin and millet. Not exactly sure, but these two things, you can't use them for matzah. You can't use them for challah. Minani mili, Amar Reish Lakish, Asya lechem lechem mimatzah. Mamash Yana the Yom Rabbi Avi. Asya lechem lechem mimatzah. You can learn out lechem lechem from matzah. Ksiv hacha. It says by chala v'hoya ba'ochelchem milechem haaretz. That creates the chi of chala. Ksiv hasam lechem aini. So just like lechem aini is from the 5 grains, hu adin what? The chala is from the 5 grains. For hasam gufa minolon. Over there, how do you know that matzah is only from the 5 grains? Reish Lakish, v'chein tana b'Rei Shmuel, v'chein tana b'Rei Eliezer ben Yaakov, Makra, suchal olav chametz, shivas yom toich olav matzos, lechem oini, devorim aboili de chimutz, something that can come to chimutz, adam yaitze ben yechavasa Pesach. It has to be the possibility that it come chametz, and therefore the 5 grains. Yatsu elu, it would exclude oireis v'doichin, it would exclude rice and millet. If you leave rice mixed with water, it's going to spoil. If you leave doichen mixed with water, it's going to spoil. If you leave the 5 grains of water, it's going to ferment and become chametz. That's the din. Start from zeh, they combine tana hatfua v'akamochim v'abetzeikos. Start from zeh. Tvua it's not processed. Kamochim it's ground. Betzeikos it's already mixed with water. The mitzvah of zemzeh they combine together. Lamai hilchasa l'inyan mahalacha they combine together. Amarav kahana l'inyan chadash. That if you would eat chadash from a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, it would combine to the shira chadash to be mechayev malchus. Rabbi Yosef Amar l'inyan chametz for Pesach to be chayev karis. Rav Papa Amar l'inyan ma'aser sheni the achalei chutz l'chametz laka. If you eat it outside Yerushalayim, you'd get malchus. So these share of Tfua, Kamachim, B'tseikos, they all combine, and different man the Amrim, different opinion. It could be Chadash, it could be Chametz, it could be Ma'aser Sheni. Rava Amma, Linyan Tumas Eichlin, and this is the share of a Beitza, fellas, not this right Tumas Eichlin, the share of a Beitza. V'hal Kamashmalon, the Tfu Kamachim, when it's speaking about Tfu Kamachim, and this is what when Rashi said in the Mishnah, it's going to explain when it says it's mitzarif dum yud b'tseikos. Mahasam uchla be'ena, just like b'tseikos, the achal is there. Afhacha, so too regarding the kemach and tfua, it must be uchla be'en, the ochel's be'en, which Rashi says excludes the klippas. You should take off the shell and the bran and the subin, which is not something that's edible. That's not something that's edible. So when it says over here, we're comparing it to bitsekas, just like when in the state of dough, it's totally edible. So too when it's flour and when it's tfua, it must be already processed to the point where you remove the outer shell, right, which is unedible. Tanya is a proof. Guys, I'm going to prove to you that you have to go ahead and take off the klipa, take off the shell. Hatanya is a proof, guys. Benichusa. This is not a kasha. Chita, bein klufa, bein she'ena klufa. Wheat, whether it's shelled or not shelled, mitzarefes. It's going to combine. However, so'ira, kilufa, if it is what? Shelled, mitzarefes. She'ena klufa, ein mitzarefes. That's your raya. That's your raya. You see that it has to be what? Ba'uchla be'ena. The oichel has to be be'en when the sa'or is in a state of what? Of unshelled, where it has its klipa, it's considered unedible. Says the Gemara, Ini, is it really so? It's considered unedible. V'hatanad Rabbi Shmuel, a kol zera zarua asher yizareya. Kiderech shebeni odam moitzim lizriya chita b'klipasa u'sa'ora b'klipasa v'adashim b'klipasa. So you see, guys, sa'ora b'klipasa is considered edible. Guys, you see, sa'or b'klipasa is considered edible. Like kasha ha'balachas ha'biyaveshais. When it's lach, when it's moist, it's considered edible. When it's dry, it's unedible. So two different times of it's in its klipa. V'asurim b'chadash mifnei ha'omer minani mili am reish lakish asya lechem lechem matzah. It says by the omer lechem koli v'karmel, and it says by matzah lechem oini. Ma matzah is from the 5 minim and not oyes v'doichen. So to chadash is from the 5 minim and not. So in other words, guys, there's no din of chadash by rice. If you see a bag that says challah genumen by rice. Amratz's come challah genumen. It's not challah genumen. You don't have to take a challah. You don't have to. It's chodesh. It's not possible. Okay, I think I'm going to stop over here. We'll see Bes Hashem tomorrow.